Hope you're having a great day. Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio as we continue to celebrate so many incredible people across the state of Mississippi who are working in the trenches to make this such a great place to live, work, and play. Hey, we've been spending a lot of time over the last couple of weeks kind of reflecting really about Hurricane Katrina and the 20th anniversary, not in a way that's celebrating Katrina, of course, but really celebrating the recovery and renewal of not just coastal Mississippi, but Mississippi in the wake of that unbelievable storm, the largest natural disaster in American history. And so it's been really good for me, pleasant for me to have this opportunity to reconnect with so many people that I had the real pleasure and honor of working in the trenches with during that time. We learned a lot about ourselves, our community. We learned about leadership. It changed lives. It changed lives in so many different ways. And when I think about my guests today, Cloyd and Brian Sanderson, I don't think that they would leave a conversation about the Katrina aftermath and not say literally that it changed their lives forever. It changed the trajectory of their lives. It changed everything about them. And they are in a different place because of that Katrina experience. But without any further ado, let me welcome my friends Cloyd and Brian Sanderson. We'll tell you a little bit more about what they do these days. But before we go any further, just how you guys doing?
Doing well. Thank you for having us, Ricky. Great to see you.
Doing great. Absolutely.
Well, look, Joe, we'll start with you because, you and I had a little prior history. Before Hurricane Katrina, you were the aide de camp for Governor Barber. You traveled with him. You can tell people more about what that's all about. And not long before Katrina, you actually moved to coastal Mississippi to be involved in putting together a major conference that was going to take place here in coastal Mississippi, which obviously, as a result of Katrina, didn't happen at least that year. But yeah, I got to know you. You would always come into the editorial boards with Governor Barber and be in the background and represented him well. And little did we know at that time that we would sort of get joined at the hip in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. But tell people a little bit about what you did and what you did after the storm.
Yeah, so I moved down to the Mississippi coast from Jackson in June of 2005, and I rented a cool little spot in Biloxi and had established a little small office there. I had been tapped by Governor Barber to run the National Governors Association's annual meeting that was supposed to be held in Biloxi in 2006. And obviously Katrina changed the trajectory and timing of that event. Thankfully, it was able to get rescheduled a few years later, and it was quite a successful endeavor in 2009. But what I moved down for did not materialize, but it did turn into an opportunity to give back and to serve the governor in a different capacity on the Governor's Commission on Recovery, Rebuilding, and Renewal, which did so many large planning efforts for each city, got us to think a little differently about how to build back. And that was such a great opportunity to work on that effort with you and with Brian. And it was such it was a challenging window for everybody, but it was, looking back 20 years later, it was quite a lot got done in a difficult situation.
Yeah, you were a young guy at the time. And I remember, of course, my conference room at the Sun Herald, my conference rooms, plural, at the Sun Herald, because there weren't places to meet, often was a place where various governor's commission meetings would take place. And you guys, literally worked out of my executive suite for over a year. But what was interesting is I remember talking to you. This is the way of sort of transitioning to what you do now. Then we'll go back and reflect on Katrina. I remember asking you as we were sort of departing and you were going to kind of go on with your life. I said, what are you going to do now, Joe? You said, well, I think I'm going to get into building. I'm going to start building some things. And that's what you did, isn't it?
That was, I felt called to do it. There was a lot of opportunity after Katrina. There was a lot of demand, and that's good old American capitalism, and have been in that business more intensely every year since Katrina, and feel like I brought a lot of good products to the market on the Gulf Coast, primarily here in Ocean Springs.
Yeah, so give people a sense of what that was.
So the first couple of projects that I worked on were a couple of Katrina cottage communities, cottages at Oak Park and cottages at 2nd Street in Ocean Springs and Pass Christian, respectively. Those were neat community development assets to be a part of. One was a renovation of a 50-year-old mobile home park, and so I feel like really upgraded that area of town, and it's helped downtown kind of bubble out east a little bit since, I'm trying to think when we opened that in 2008, 7, 8, something like that. And so have done some of those infill redevelopments, including a couple of hotels, the Roost, the Springs, the Hemingway. Have opened lighthouse assisted living and memory care. All of these I've done with great and different groups of partners for the most part, and have been excited to bring those projects online. Most recently, I actually renovated Anchor Square, which was a old MEMA cottage community in downtown Pascagoula, and I'm about to open the train depot in partnership with Chandelier and C. Roberts coming up, later this year, first of next year, and are very excited about that, especially with the Amtrak recently starting this week. It's been a neat thing. And then finally, I've gotten into the apartment business on Mallet Road at the Lofts. So we'll be cutting the ribbon on Lofts 2 very soon. So looking forward to getting that product launched on the market. So it's been a fun ride, and more good things to come.
But it's true that Katrina changed the trajectory of your life, and we'll come back to what some of those learnings were in just a second. Brian, you I didn't know you before, but you came in as on loan, an attorney on loan to the Governor's Commission. Explain what your role was.
Yeah, you're right, Ricky. So I was practicing. I was in private law practice at Butler Snow in Gulfport. Had been there for, I guess, about 6 years at the time Katrina struck. And you'll remember, literally just a couple of days after Katrina, the governor knew that there had to be, some real private sector leadership, a real targeted effort among locals to come together. And so he asked me if I would come on board and serve as general counsel to that commission that was chaired, of course, by Jim Barksdale and executive director Henry Barber. And that's kind of how that started. And you're right, it changed the trajectory of my professional life, certainly, but also my personal life. Met my wife through that, through those weeks and years. And so it's sometimes it feels like it was days ago, and sometimes it feels like it was, more than 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Of course, for people who are regular listeners know that we've fully told the story of how you and Marie came together, but Marie is a policy mind, and she worked for both Thad Cochran and for Governor Barber. And now today she's highly sought out across the nation. She has multiple businesses. And tell people what you do today.
So after Katrina, I was policy director for the Republican Attorney General's Association, and then the Republican Governors Association, which was a lot of fun. Got to kind of develop a new skill set, but still use my legal training and education. And then after that, in 2019, I started my own consulting firm called Three Oak Group, where I still work closely with attorney generals across the nation and governors all in Republican circles, and helping folks navigate that landscape, both on the policy and a little bit of the political side. So it's been a lot of fun. It's allows me to be where I love to be here on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, but also travel when needed, which is fairly frequently. So it's been great. I couldn't ask for kind of a better cadence of professional life.
As I've told you and Marie before, the thought that so much of your world plays out in your professional life in other places, and that you're both engaged in that way with this growing family and this terrific foundation in Ocean Springs. It's amazing to me that you've actually pulled it off. And as Marie often says, it takes a village, and thank God you've got people to support you in that effort. But it's a great commitment. It just shows that you can still live in coastal Mississippi and have a national footprint and be very successful at it. And you and Marie have certainly done that. Hey, let's do this. When we come back on the other side with Joe and Brian, we're going to start to kind of break it down. I'm curious about when they look back on Katrina, what comes to mind? I mean, this is a great opportunity for us to reflect. We learned so much about ourselves, and we learned so much about our state and leadership. And we may never see that again. We may never see what we observed in that aftermath, that what I call in Haley's book, the gold standard. We may never see that again. And when we come back on the other side, we'll continue the conversation. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show. We're doing some Katrina reflection as the 20th anniversary of Katrina rapidly approaches us. And Joe Cloyd, who was heavily involved in the Governor's Commission after Hurricane Katrina, he worked with Haley Barbour for the time preceding Hurricane Katrina, and Brian Sanderson, who was a lawyer at Butler Snow and was essentially on loan to the Governor's Commission. And as we were discussing before we went to break, that it literally changed the trajectory of both of their lives. They got introduced to new capabilities. And I'm not surprised, incidentally, because working with you guys, smart people kind of find their way. And as you get more experience, there's a serendipity about life. I often said that it was literally only one interview that I ever went on in my life. The rest of my job opportunities just kind of happened along the way. And I never really worried much about the future because I knew someone or something in my future, I would meet them and it would change the trajectory. And it happened. It happened throughout my life. That's what Katrina did to you guys. It changed your trajectory. Brian, I can remember, just speaking of like the early days, we had that first meeting less than a week after Hurricane Katrina at the Sun Herald with some community leaders and the governor. And within, by the next week, we had identified who the vice chairman of the commission was going to be. He had already reached out to Jim Barksdale. He had, Henry Barbour was already on board. Henry and I visited a couple of weeks ago and we reflected on a lot of this. But I can remember, like, for example, one of the most important decisions we made, that Haley made, was that we're not going to run the commission with state money, with government money. We wanted it to be privately funded, so it didn't have all the encumbrances of that. So we literally formed a nonprofit. I was one of the officers, of course. You were the lawyer for the nonprofit. I remember sitting at the Isle of Capri as we were building this plane and flying it at the same time with $1 million from the Knight Foundation, $1 million from Jim Barksdale. With the $2 million, we ran the commission. And you had, okay, we need to sign here, Ricky. We need to sign there. Man, we were moving at light speed, and we needed to be moving at light speed. But it was amazing that we were so focused so early, wasn't it?
Yeah, it truly was. And I don't know that I've experienced something like that since then. It was, a result of, obviously, as you said, the need. And then, it was the character of the people of Mississippi that was revealed through that crisis, coupled with unbelievable leadership at the state, local, federal level, and then the private sector leadership, yourself, Anthony Topazzi, Ron Perisic, all of those folks, KKL, all of those folks who just came together and said, we're all rowing in the same direction. And, what do we need to do? And you're right. It was lightning speed, and it had to be.
Yeah. And, George Slogel, mentioning George and Ron and Anthony, God bless their souls. They're no longer with us. And that's, one of the things I've talked about on the show often is that if I have a concern, looking back, the concern is that that tattoo that got made on our DNA about what leadership is, about about how we can rise in a difficult time, how we can come together in a difficult time. That there are a lot of, some of our leaders in the community today weren't old enough to be a part of the effort, and that's just the way it was. Others aren't here any longer. Some have left the area. New leaders have come to the area, but there's a growing concern that what we learned about our ability to work together, our ability to rise above in some of the most unbelievable situations, that we're losing some of that DNA. Joe, do you ever think about that? I mean, think about how, it's been 20 years. I mean, it's amazing to me that it has been 20 years, because in some ways it feels like it was yesterday. But I wish we could capture those learnings and just tell people when they become a leader here in coastal Mississippi, you got to go to this school real quick. That's going to sear your DNA with these learnings, and then come on and join us. And that way we won't make the same mistakes again. Do you ever think about that?
Yeah, it's interesting that you put it that way, but I think it's helpful to look at how far we've come. There are genuine One Coast efforts going on. Do we need to improve upon those? Yes, but I think it's that situation has gotten better since I've been here and since Katrina in the last 20 years. And again, there is. It's not complete, but there has been progress, and I think that's worth noting. But from Katrina is one of those experiences that it's not translatable or transmutable, I guess you'd say. You had to have gone through it to really have that tattoo. It's something that we kind of earned going through the struggle. And so it makes me think about one of the first public meetings that we put on. You were there, Brian. I think you were too, in Hancock County. And Chuck Benvenuti was facilitating a public meeting looking at the future, and most people were there needing basic food and basic supplies. And I'll never forget Chuck's, quip about it, that it's hard to think about draining the swamp when you got alligators biting at your ass. And so, and how far Hancock County and Bay St. Louis have come in those 20 years is quite remarkable. And that is due to leadership that was in place at the time, but also this new crop of leaders that you're talking about, who have either evolved or grown into those roles, which I think is quite a testament for us.
I'll never forget that meeting in Hancock County, because it was, of course, Hancock County was ground zero to Katrina. We met at the church on Beach Boulevard that had its walls blown out, so it was literally an open air pavilion. And so here we're having the first public meeting for the Governor's Commission in Hancock County, which was ground zero for the storm, and it was tough. But at the same time, a lot of the conversations afterwards, I mean, people were just trying to figure. I mean, some of it was they didn't understand what kind of meeting they were going to, because we were telling that we're giving them an update about, I know these, we're all thinking about where we're going to get our food and our water from and where we're going to live. But there's other things that we've got to do simultaneous to that. And that is, we've got to figure out what are things like new FEMA maps and infrastructure needs and all these things, how all these insurance, all these things going to swirl simultaneously to help us make decisions to rebuild quicker. But Joe, you remember after the meeting, this woman, and I write about her in my book, incidentally, but she kind of hovered in the back. And afterwards, she grabbed me, because if you remember, after the meeting, we were doing a debriefing, and I was kind of leading the debriefing. And she hovered. And afterwards, I went over to her and said, "Ma'am, can I help you?" She said, "Come outside. I want to show you something." You probably remember this. And she was in a van. Her home was destroyed. Her family, she had lost family members. And all she wanted to say, the reason she came to the meeting, was to tell me to be sure to pre-position buses next time, that too many people died that didn't have gas in their car or didn't have a car. And that's the only reason she came to the meeting. And in the book, I write about making your pain your purpose. I was so touched by her. And then she gave me a hug. she got in her van and she drove off. And my biggest regret, I think I told you this, but my biggest regret is I didn't get her name. But we did add it to the report. We did add her input to the report. But you remember that, don't you?
I do. And what a selfless and patient act in that time of crisis that she was going through. I mean, and she's one of hundreds of people that were in a giving mode. Pick yourself up by your bootstraps. After that just god awful window of the storm.
Yeah, just incredible. Brian, were you with us in Hancock County? I can't remember.
I don't recall. I may have been in Jackson at that time. We were kind of the commission, and then we had folks on the ground here. I don't remember that as clearly as y'all do, but there are so many stories like that for sure.
Yeah, it was so much inspiration around us, man. I mean, what I remember, one of the things I said in my book, Joe and Brian, was that tears were normal. It was kind of normal as people would reconnect. I remember in particular the day, you may have been there, Joe, at the newspaper, but we hadn't heard from Reed Geist. We knew that he had stayed at his home, and I was beginning to think maybe he was killed. And I felt that way about a lot of people. And about 2 weeks after the storm, he came walking in the front door of the newspaper, and I was in a meeting in the conference room, and somebody said, "Reed's here." I said, "Reed's here? Oh my God, he's alive." And of course, you can imagine the hugs, but that was not unusual. That was kind of normal that we would reconnect in that way. You've had that experience big time, didn't you, Brian?
I did. Yeah. I mean, from high school friends the day after Katrina to folks that were down the coast, to like Reed Geist that you saw, 2 or 3 weeks and you just hadn't heard, we didn't have Facebook or, the ability to connect like we do today. So it was, it was emotions running high all the time.
It was amazing. I often said that Steve Jobs didn't introduce the iPhone until 2 years after Katrina. Put that in your head for a second.
Yeah.
Crazy to think of it in those terms. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation looking back on Hurricane Katrina with Joe, Cloyd, and Brian Sanderson. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. We're visiting with Joe, Cloyd, and Brian Sanderson, who worked so closely with all of us in the trenches after Hurricane Katrina. Joe, you mentioned a few minutes ago that you weren't there to get the tattoo. You just weren't there. I remember one, and it actually spurred a lesson that I wrote about. I remember one leader complaining to Anthony and me that they weren't included. This is a year after Katrina. And both of us looked at him and said, "What do you mean weren't included? None of us were included, man. It was a personal choice to step up in the moment." And we said, "Look, it is what it is, but we could use your help. We're tired and we could use your help." Anthony and I later talked about, and we didn't use the word tattoo. We said the blood pricking, like the Little Rascals used to do. We became blood brothers in that moment. But if you weren't there, you weren't there for the moment. But that's true. There's a bond that occurred among all of us, wasn't there, Joe?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Among community leaders, among our staff, on the Governor's Commission and working across all the excellent displays of leadership that local government did. I mean, what a tough job being a supervisor was during that window, being a mayor, being on the councilor board of aldermen. I mean, those emergency management directors. I mean, they're General Spraggins starting the day before Katrina or within a week. I forgot exactly the time frame. I know it was really close. And people stepped up, and there was certainly I don't know the individual you're talking about, but I don't know how many public meetings got facilitated by the Governor's Commission, much less normal public city and county meetings. But there was plenty of opportunity to get involved. That was not lacking, for sure.
Yeah, that kind of came with the learning that we and I'll share something. Just a couple of paragraphs from something I wrote about it, but it is in the category of we move fast. The type A personalities tend to draw a lot of attention, and we thought, we tend to look at them as the best leaders. And there's another group of people, maybe the type B personalities, aren't looking for any attention whatsoever. What happens is we move through our lives so fast, man, and we miss the essence of other people. And we assume that certain people are going to lead. And in some ways, you might have been a little disappointed after Katrina, but you were not ultimately disappointed because other people stepped up to the plate in such dramatic ways. And what we learned about the essence of others in the wake of that storm was so inspiring. I didn't even think about the people who weren't there. I could only think about the people who were there. And it was something to behold, though, wasn't it, Brian?
No doubt. Yeah. I mean, it's great. Thinking back, and there's still, copies of the Governor's Commission report floating around. It would be, probably another show to just, look back through that and remembering all the people that really put the work into there. And I think back, and I'm really struck by, it cut across not only geographically, from the six southernmost counties, but from across political lines. None of that mattered. Everyone came together and had their own part, kind of their own expertise of what they brought to the table. And I remember the governor's mandate was to have that report no later than December 31st. And I can remember vividly, getting a FedEx out to Jim Barksdale. I think he was, out of the state at the time, of getting him that first proof of the report, in order to make that December 31st deadline. And we did. But it was a great, now probably a historical document of what we did in, 3.5 months of compiling that. A lot of it was used and had a great legacy that, the fruit is still bearing today from it. But yeah, it was an amazing confluence of folks that probably would have never certainly worked together, may not have even known each other socially before that, but they did at the time. And, I think everyone's lives were changed for the better because of it.
Yeah, Brian, that's so well put. I mean, so many things had to happen simultaneously. And what was interesting, I didn't fully appreciate. I mean, he told us he was doing. I was just talking specifically about Haley Barbour. He told us that he was spending time in Washington, but I didn't fully grasp what that looked like until I had the opportunity to work with Jerry on the book, and writing the foreword and seeing some of the early work that Jerry was putting together, which was not only a telling of what we were doing here in coastal Mississippi around the commission, but also the story of what was happening in Washington simultaneous to that, and how many times he went to Washington and what he was doing to align this bipartisan effort that was incredibly important, incidentally, because Mary Landrieu had gone to Washington asking for $250 billion, and it created this chilling effect. And the irony is I end up in New Orleans as a publisher of the Times-Picayune, who also had a Pulitzer Gold Medal after Hurricane Katrina, the same as the Sun-Herald did. And I got to see it from their perspective. But what Governor Barbour ultimately was able to do is help sort of recalibrate the conversations for both states. He had just incredible, impact. But the work that he spent up there and how the governor's commission work flowed into that effort. My goodness, he had such a clear understanding that we needed to be able to validate it. And the governor's commission report was something people could put in their hands. It was amazing, Brian, to see all that come together.
Yeah, there was a real dichotomy in the way of leadership, of how our friends and neighbors to the west approached it. Governor Blanco, was probably doing her level best, but Governor Barbour was the right leader at the right time. And our two senior senators, Senator Cochran being chair of appropriations, and you're right, we didn't ask for the moon, but we had real credible needs that were backed up by evidence, and it was clear and concise. And I think that really what won the day, not only for Mississippi, but to your point, for Louisiana as well in many respects.
And it required a bipartisan effort. I mean, his ability to get leaders on the Democratic side on our working with us and on our team was so important. But then simultaneous to that, he was working with Billy McCoy. I mean, this worm farmer from Rienzi, who was the Speaker of the House of Mississippi, who had to turn his head away from getting in the way of dockside gaming. Joe, you were sensitive to some of that stuff that was happening in the state, but man, what a miraculous series of things that had to occur to get us to where casinos could even reopen again.
Absolutely. Yeah. The Governor Barber's ability to like you said, reach across the aisle, make the House at the time really, feel and understand the pain that was going on economically, socially. What are we really going to do to revive our economy? And it was such an important effort, and he was able to make those compelling arguments at the state level to probably less sophisticated eyes and ears, and contemporaneously have this big message to DC, where we really did need the large volume of dollars to recover infrastructure and expand the port and grow our wastewater system further north, where the population growth would go and is going. It was the essence and definition of leadership is what he did, and he had lots and lots of people around you. And Jerry St. Pay's one we've not mentioned was so instrumental to all this. Mr. Bridgedale, so many others that just picked up
Jerry
picked up the wagon and pulled. And we were
I think about Jerry. Jerry was not only a phenomenal leader for what was happening in Jackson County, sort of being the man on the ground as it related to the public meeting we had in Jackson County. He was also chairman of the Gaming Commission. So I mean, when I met with him on this show, I mean, he talked about what he immediately began to do, traveling to Las Vegas, dealing with some of these owners and helping them begin to understand how we were going to deal with this. And I think we use the word FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that was created by Hurricane Katrina was enormous. And when you think about the gaming community, I mean, they had a lot to think about, because you're literally coming back in, investing hundreds of millions of dollars back in this market to rebuild. They had to know there was a there. And in order to know there was a there, they had to know that there was confidence that housing was going to come back, schools were going to be open, that all the support businesses that the casinos needed, that the legislature was going to support the land-based aspect of what they needed. I mean, good Lord. Again, people who are not here can't appreciate all the various pieces that had to be put into place, but it's miraculous. And then you think about the Mississippi Renewal Forum with 100 architects and planners from around the world, led by famed architect Andreas Dwani, happening 5 weeks after the storm, which began to help people at least think about what could be. And all of that, it's amazing. It's amazing we survived it. And it changed all of us. There's not a person who wasn't involved in it that it didn't change us as people. And what a blessing that was. I mean, it had happened, but boy, I'm so glad I was able to be in that aftermath to see what true inspiration and leadership is all about. Hey, when we come back on the other side, we'll close out our conversation with Joe Cloyd and Brian Sanderson, two people that I had the opportunity, the blessing of working closely in the trenches of the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. We're having a terrific conversation with, like serial entrepreneur Joe Cloyd, and a guy that I have a terrific amount of respect for, a lawyer. He's also a consultant. He's also an entrepreneur with his wife, Marie. What they're doing nationally is so impressive. I don't know how they do it with a bunch of kids, but they do it. And it's very impressive to watch. Terrific parents. So is Joe, for that matter. We're reflecting on Hurricane Katrina. Let me share just the beginning of one of the, we kind of reflected on this a bit a minute ago, but it really speaks to the people that we were surrounded by. And it's a lesson that I captured after Hurricane Katrina. And I'll just share the beginning of it with you. And here's what I wrote. We move too fast, judging others too quickly, too often racing past people, selling short those we encounter or haven't even noticed. And in our chaotic worlds, we're missing the true essence and the blessing of those around us. That was never more clear to me than after Katrina. People I thought I knew surprised me with the depth of their resolve to step up and make a difference. Others I expected to step up fell short. I had misjudged too many people around me, or worse, didn't see them at all. It literally made me sad seeing how rushing through life had robbed me of so much inspiration. Katrina's crisis revealed something incredibly beautiful in the people around me, teaching me that the true character often lies beneath the surface we think we know, waiting to be revealed if we will only take the time to see it. And I go from there. But isn't that true? I mean, when you hear that, Brian, what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, it's beautifully said, Ricky, and you're right. I mean, I've fallen into that trap as well as rushing through and not, taking the time to really get to know and appreciate what different folks that come into your life, what they bring and what they can teach you. And the greatest lessons I think I've learned so far in life, so many of those came from those weeks and months after Hurricane Katrina, and all certainly dealing with some despair, but also just the amount of optimism and hope that people had of what their lives could be. It's amazing that I think the statistic was like 3 months after Katrina, our population had rebounded to pre-Katrina levels. People may have moved north or temporarily other places, but it was because Governor Barbour insisted on the schools being back open so quickly, and that was so critical to not only just sort of the routine of life getting back into place, but also for our businesses. Our economic revival was so critical that schools were reopened, that kids could continue to learn, that their lives wouldn't be disrupted, and their parents could have that consistency in day to day to start rebuilding their lives. So, so many lessons from folks along the ways.
There really were. What comes to mind for you, Joe, when you think about that?
My mind went more specific. We've talked a lot about Governor Barbour and his gargantuan efforts that he did, but on a more human level, his wife, Marcia, was such a quiet force down on the coast. She was, with the National Guard and Highway Patrol cutting their way down from Hattiesburg as soon as the eye of the storm passed, and she really went through probably personal danger and but significant effort to bring help and assistance in the immediate aftermath of the storm to people that really, really needed it and probably couldn't have access to it. And so it just makes me think about of her and her efforts that don't need to be forgotten, because she was such a significant.
I can't agree more. We got about 2 minutes left, but I wrote about Marcia, and in particular one. I mean, I saw her in so many different settings, but one thing that happened in Hancock County when we had gone over there to meet, and she was with us, and the way she would go hug people and people, a lot of people didn't even know who she was. That was one of the most interesting things. And she didn't really want people to know who she was. She just wanted to be here to help. And I'm at least in my book, I'm going to make sure that part's not lost. I think about Governor William Winter, a Democrat. I mean, what Governor Barbour said, we got to have a bipartisan, a nonpartisan effort. He brought Derrick Johnson, at the time, the president of Mississippi NAACP, and then ultimately he's the national president today. I remember so well how they contributed to this. There wasn't tension in the room. There was a belief that we had to do this together. That was pretty compelling, wasn't it, Joe?
Yeah, it was. And it, everybody just kind of got in the boat and rowed in the same direction for the most part. And certainly there were disagreements and some significant ones, but they were more on direction and policy and not all this, in the grand scheme, minor political bickering that's going on. And it's really it's a testament to what real leaders can do during tough times, and it was great to see that. And I know that the Mississippi coast is still set to continue to get much better in 30 years after Katrina than it is 20.
Yeah, I'm excited about our future. Listen, Joe, Cloyd and Brian Sanderson, it has been an honor to spend a little bit of time with you reflecting on this incredible time in our lives. Thank you for joining me.
It's been great being with you, Ricky. Thank you. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you for having me, Brian. It's good to talk to you here virtually. It's been great.
Okay. Hey, listen, have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.